I mean, this idea that Russia wants Trump to be the president again is just very strange to me.
If you look at Benjamin Netanyahu and Vladimir Putin, these are two people that he will let it get away with whatever they want.
President Trump is the only president in our last four that Putin did not invade another country under.
Hi, I'm Theo Usherwood, and this is the election of our times. Today we're speaking to Shaniqua McClendon, the political strategist, and Jennifer Ewing, who is the head of strategy at the Centre for Digital Assets and Democracy. If I could just start with the first story, both about the Labour Party sending activists over to the United States to help the Democrat campaign. Jennifer, can I just stop asking you, is Trump right to raise concerns about this, or is it just a little bit of politicking on the behalf of the Republicans?
Look, I think it's probably right for him to raise the issue. I don't know how many times the Labour Party is going to have to apologize to Trump, whether it's David Lammy apologizing for, the comments he's made several years ago or some of the others. I think, I have no problem with him bringing it to the attention. Now, the interesting thing is whether it's legal or not, let's let the FEC decide. But I think the more important issue is, will it be effective? And I'm guessing the answer is probably not. I'm not sure that British people rocking up on the front doorstep of some of the swing states is particularly effective, especially, and I say this with all due respect to my adopted country, especially the way things are going in the United Kingdom right now.
If Trump were to win the White House, do you think he is going to damage relations? Because actually, Starmer had been working quite hard, and his team had been working quite hard through the ambassador Karen Pierce to ensure that Starmer's number 10 had relations both with the Harris camp and with the Trump camp.
I would like to think that it would not damage relations. Trump, as you know, has had a lot of things thrown at him, a lot of things said about him to his face, behind his back, including his own vice presidential candidate, J.D. Vance. So he has obviously learned to forgive people. So no, I think because he's such a Anglophile, I think he will take the high road in regards to this, and the special relationship, as it's called, will hopefully remain intact.
Keir Starmer is insisting that, there are close relations with the Labour Party and the Democrat Party. This is something that's been done in elections past. It's not a big deal. But for the Democrats, is this something which actually, to Jennifer's point, is actually going to make a material difference, these volunteers? Or is it a bit of a busman's holiday, as we say here in the UK, for people who are just so engrossed in politics they can't get enough of it? So having won the general election for Keir Starmer, Labour Party activists can go and take part in the final weeks of this presidential election campaign.
After Kamala Harris became the nominee, she's had so many United States volunteers sign up that I don't think this is going to have a tremendous impact on the outcome. But I do think that it demonstrates the stakes for people outside of the United States of what happens in this election. There are people around the world who, if Donald Trump becomes president, will be affected negatively. I also think it's interesting that Donald Trump chose to weigh in on this, but continues to say that Russian interference in our elections is not happening, and it's happening in a really nefarious way. It's not people going to knock on doors for him. There was a story going around recently that Governor Walz had abused or behaved with some of his students inappropriately. That wasn't true. And that's, a lot more detrimental than knocking on a door. But overall, I don't think that this is... You'd have to be sending hundreds of thousands or at least thousands of volunteers over here to have an impact. That would be more than what we're seeing from the hundreds of thousands of volunteers that are hitting the doors now. Vote Save America alone, the program I run, we've recruited about 70,000 people to help out. So I don't think it's going to have that great of an impact.
Do you think that Trump is, if you like, trying to draw an equivalence, a false equivalence? So he can say, aha, you might claim about Russian interference on my side, but look what's going on with the Democrats and the Labour Party. It's just the same. And actually, from what you're saying, you don't necessarily think that an equivalence can be drawn.
So he always tries to, make things that are not related. The big difference here is we all know that these volunteers are coming over. No one's hiding it. No one's lying about it. It's all out in the open. The The reason you can't do that with what's happening on the other side is because it's deception, it's lies. If, not that this would make it better, but if they stood up and said, hey, we are paying conservative content makers to spread Russian propaganda for us, raise your hand and say that. They're not saying it because it's different and it's not the same as sending a few volunteers over here. I don't think it would be a good look for Trump to have Russian volunteers knocking on doors for him. But if that's what was happening, then we could equate the two.
Jennifer Ewing, what do you think?
I mean, this idea that Russia wants Trump to be the president again is just very strange to me. President Trump is the only president in our last four that Putin did not invade another country under. Obviously, Georgia under Bush, and then Ukraine under Obama and Biden. So I don't know where this association, other than the original Russia hoax, which was turned out to be a Hillary Clinton campaign sort of hoax, turned out that Putin and Trump are best friends. So I do think it's a false equivalence.
Is there a fair point in that, Shaniqua, in that if you look at the global peace and the fact that we have seen conflict in the Middle East, we've seen under Biden, we've seen Russia invade Ukraine, and this is something that I've heard elsewhere, that despots around the world look at Donald Trump and they almost see somebody who's as crazy as them, and they think, actually, hang on a moment, I'm not prepared to do the big plan that I had if Donald Trump's president, because I'm unsure about the response I'm going to get. Whereas with Biden, with Obama, with George W. Bush, there is they see the world through relatively predictable ways, and actually that actually for Putin, he can see that as a weakness because he knows their next move.
Yeah. So I think the underlying message here is that Donald Trump is someone who is really reactive, and that's true. But look at the people who waited for him to be gone. It's people that he admires. If you look at Benjamin Netanyahu and Vladimir Putin, these are two people that he will let it get away with whatever they want. So I think it's in their interest to start these conflicts. And, I don't want to say that about what's happening in Israel and Gaza, because that was, Hamas who initiated that attack on October 7th. But these are, like, Donald Trump's not going to do anything to those two leaders. I don't think any American leader can determine when something happens in a foreign nation. Okay, these things didn't happen while Trump was in office. It's not as if we did not have wars going on while Trump was in office. It's not as if he, and I know he has lots of comments on the withdrawal from Afghanistan, but it's not like he did anything to end the war there, or, in our presence there sooner. So and the whole thought that just because these leaders, or specifically Vladimir Putin, has said he doesn't like Donald Trump and he's like endorsing Kamala Harris, I think we'd be ridiculous to believe anything that is coming out of his mouth. Things will be much better for him with his invasion of Ukraine if Donald Trump is president. Donald Trump has made it really clear and pulled a lot of the Republican Party into a place where they don't want to support Ukraine after they have Russia just invade their country. So it's really, really hard for me to believe, despite what is being kind of presented to our faces, that behind the scenes, this is not something he wants. Like, why is Vladimir Putin even saying who he wants to be president over here? He's trying to make it look like he wants Kamala Harris to just drive up support amongst Trump's base to turn out. But it's ridiculous.
Can I just ask you, you mentioned that you referred to Benjamin Netanyahu and Vladimir Putin as if, these leaders, you refer to them as these leaders. Is there a view on the Democrat side of an equivalence of that they are part of the same problem? Because certainly in this country, on the right, in the centre and the right, that Netanyahu is seen as somebody who is at war on seven fronts, namely against Iran, driving Hamas, driving Hezbollah, and that actually there is no equivalence between Benjamin Netanyahu and Vladimir Putin. Quite the opposite.
The connection I am making here are two people who will be emboldened with Donald Trump in office. That is the only connection I'm making. These are two people that if he is in office, he will give them a blank check to do whatever they want. He's already said that Israel needs to finish off Palestinians, and he does not support Ukraine. So specifically what where I'm saying that they have some parallels is that these are two leaders that Donald Trump would allow to do what they are trying to do right now, but can't fully execute because the United States does not want them to.
Jennifer Ewing, do you think that, how do you think Donald Trump will deal with Netanyahu? Do you think it's right that he'll give him a blank check? And if he was to, if we're entering a stage in the war in the Middle East actually where Benjamin Netanyahu is willing to take on Iran, having taken on Hamas and then Hezbollah and goes for Iran, is that something necessarily to be feared by Trump's camp?
No, I don't think so. And I think, first of all, I agree with Shaniqua that I think Putin saying he's supporting Kamala Harris should be taken with a complete grain of salt. And who knows who he really wants. But from a foreign policy, I don't think he wants Trump. But going back to your question on Netanyahu, no, I think, Trump absolutely in the beginning made comments that, look, the Middle East would not be on fire if I was still in office. And, with regards to wars, he is correct. There were no new wars started during his 4 years of being president. There were some legacy wars for sure, but there were no new wars. And I think what he was saying is, first of all, it wouldn't have happened under his watch. And second of all, they needed to just end it. Right? So I, especially now that it's gone on so long, do not in any way see that is a green light for Netanyahu to just go flatten Gaza. Quite the opposite, especially if you look at some of the people that he's brought on his team. He's got Tulsi Gabbard, he's got J.D. Vance, he's got obviously Bobby Kennedy Jr. A lot of them are very anti-war. We want to stop these forever wars. And going back to Ukraine for a moment, I mean, what's so interesting about the Harris-Biden administration is that nobody has been able to say what winning in Ukraine looks like. Not one person. We've got over 500,000 Ukrainian soldiers dead. Obviously, a lot of Russians dead as well. But what is the end goal here? It just seems it's forever wars. And I think Trump, as well as, thank God for J.D. Vance and Bobby Kennedy and Tulsi and some of these others, just want these forever wars to end. They want to be a little more inward looking. We've got our own problems, certainly with the $36 trillion, deficit, and then our crisis at the southern border. So no, I think the world calms down if Trump becomes president again.
Shaniqua.
That's why, just to add one more thing that you hear, and I don't know, Shaniqua, if you hear it in the States, but definitely what I hear all the time over here in the UK and Europe is how Trump wants to end NATO. Well, first of all, there was a law signed, into the books about a year ago where he cannot get out of NATO without congressional support. So that's one thing. And then number two, Trump actually has done NATO a favor by telling them, hey, we might not be able to, always be fighting your battles for you. And it would be really helpful if you get your payments up to 2% or whatever the required amount is. And of course, that got turned into he's going to turn Ukraine over to Russia. And that's not at all what was happening. He was just telling the Germans, the French, the others that they need to start paying their dues because America, we can't afford it anymore. Not just financially, but militarily, or just even with munitions and weapons.
Shaniqua, just last point on this. I just want to pick up with you if you're okay with it. Is there a danger, do you think, that Europe is going to find itself isolated without American support going up against Russia if Trump is president?
I very much think so. It's not just Trump. It's Trump with the MAGA Republicans that he has in Congress. Enough of them have picked up this sentiment that they do not want to help people. And I mean, look, there are a lot of Americans who are suffering. And because of, I don't know how to say this politely, a limited understanding of how our government works and the actual percentage and the amount of money we spend on defense, which that critique is fair, but there are a lot of Americans who do feel like resources need to stay here, we need help. And so I think on top of elected officials who I think should be more responsible about our national security, I don't think it's on everyday citizens to understand all of that really in depth. I think all of that converging will put Europe in a place where the U.S. is not sending those resources over. And, it's scary to think about. I am not a national security expert. I trust the people who are in those positions to receive the intelligence that they get and make the right decisions. But unfortunately, we have a lot of, children in Congress. We have a lot of people. Liz Cheney said this on Pod Save America. She said, we elect these crazy people who are immature and we expect them to solve really big world problems. And that is what I think we're about to run into.
You're laughing, Jennifer.
Well, I mean, she's not wrong. There are a lot of Congress people on both sides of the aisle, I think, that are just waiting for their gig on CNN or MSNBC or Fox, whatever. So, yeah, there's some people that are not in it for the American people. But likewise, there are a lot of good people there, too, who I do think go to Washington with the best intentions. So,
yeah,
it's on us to elect the right people.
Can I just move on to the comments by John Kelly, former chief of staff to Donald Trump, where he said that Trump had, when he was in office, had praised Adolf Hitler, Germany's Nazi wartime leader, and describes. John Kelly said that Trump wasn't fit to be president. Shaniqua McClendon, what does this say about Donald Trump and whether he is fit to lead the free world?
It tells us a lot about the leaders he looks up to. He is not fit to lead the free world. Something else John Kelly has said is the reason he took that job is because he knew the threat that Donald Trump was, and he wanted to be one of the grown-ups in the room who could protect the country. John Kelly's not going to be there this time. I think Donald Trump and his biggest fans around him, people like Stephen Miller, are making sure, and this is what was outlined in Project 2025. They want to get rid of anyone in government who is not, pretty much pledging their life over to the MAGA movement, and fill the government with people who will not stand in his way. Someone like Mike Pence, who I don't agree with, but he did the right thing on January 6th, and it almost cost him his life. No one like that is going to be around Donald Trump anymore. And so for him to say, I need generals like Hitler, I need those kinds of people around me, people who will not question me, who will not tell me I can't do things, who won't, stop me from going to the Capitol on January 6th so I can join all the people that I sent over there to attack the Capitol and completely undermine our democracy. It is scary, and I have recently felt like I was going crazy. Like, am I overreacting about this stuff? But then I keep hearing more and more come out and realize I'm not overreacting. He is a real threat, it's why I cannot believe this race is so close. But it just really makes me afraid to think about, who would be treated the way the Jews were treated under Hitler. Is that all of us? I don't think anyone thinks they should be spared from what's to come from that kind of thinking.
Jennifer Ewing, are we to be scared, as Shaniqua said, of a Donald Trump presidency and who this man looks up to? Or are these, does John Kelly have a reason to lie? Has he got an axe to grind?
Sure. So first of all, with regards to Project 2025, that's the Heritage Foundation, which is a right-wing think tank, and Trump's on the record as saying that is not what he's following. As a matter of fact, somebody lost their job over connecting 2025 to...
Vance's name is all over it.
So anyway, that was just ideas. But anyway, so moving on from that. But no, I think to answer your question, yes, John Kelly does have an axe to grind, number one. Number two, this is sort of old news from 4 years ago, and the fact that it's being brought out 2 weeks before an election by The Atlantic, which is owned by a major Kamala Harris donor, i.e. Lauren Powell Jobs, and was put out into the publication without anyone going on the record. They're anonymous sources. As a matter of fact, some of the people in the room said, I did not hear that. He did not say that. Is just journalism 101. So that's quite bad. So why are they doing this? I guess they've seen some internal polling and it doesn't look good. So they're doing a, last minute Hail Mary pass. But I think it's a little irresponsible to sort of say that President Trump looks up to a man, Hitler, that has murdered 80 million people and tried to eradicate an entire race. So I don't think it's effective. We don't even know if it's true. And I guess more importantly, if it is true, will it work? And I think the thing about Trump is he's been in the public eye for 50 years. So there's so much stuff that's been thrown at him, whether right or wrong, good, bad. And I will agree. There's some, terrible things that come out of his mouth. Absolutely. But I think it's all built in at this point. And I think any news that comes out, and there will be stories, on both sides breaking. I'm sure there will be in the next couple of weeks, and we'll just see who, hooks on to them. But any news that comes out will most likely, in my opinion, affect Kamala Harris. Just because she's so much, she's not as well known to the American public. I mean, we saw her run in 2020, and, she had to pull out early because the more people did see of her and hear from her, the less they liked her. And then she went on to become one of the most unpopular vice presidents. Outside of, I think, Spiro Agnew. And then, over that fateful weekend in July, they did the switcheroo. And one thing I have been fascinated by since the end of July, and I am somebody that probably a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, said there is no way Biden will be on that ticket come November. What I'm amazed about is that the Democrats were not more upset that there wasn't a primary. I mean, that there's just a coronation of Kamala Harris, who's wildly unpopular. And fine, she got a little relief bounce in the beginning because she's young and, she's good looking and she's, kind of exciting, and she wasn't Joe Biden, but that's worn off. So I'm really wondering when this is all over. And it is still very, very close, as Shaniqua says. But are the Democrats going to regret not having a proper primary where they could have had, there's a great Democrat bench. You guys have some great governors that, at least you should have picked one for a vice president, if not a presidential nominee.
Can I just pick up on 2 points that you made there with Shaniqua, Jennifer? The first point is just the one you've made about the fact that, the Democrats should have had a primary and they're going to regret choosing, just reverting to Harris because she was the VP candidate. And then secondly, is it fair to say that actually with Donald Trump, he could say anything? It's just baked in. It's who he is. And the Democrats couldn't say, look, isn't this a wrong one? But you're not going to change anybody's mind. But actually, when it comes to Harris, people are still there to be persuaded one way or another.
The reason that there are people to be persuaded is because Donald Trump has lost a lot of support. The vice president now, her favorables, she has net favorables. Donald Trump does not. J.D. Vance does not. So when we're comparing the two of them, I think, that's what we have to look at. But I think you're right. There's not much that Donald Trump can do. After January 6th, I really thought that we would see something happen. Immediately after, there were Republicans who denounced what happened, but then people like Kevin McCarthy flew down to Mar-a-Lago and went to kiss the ring and get Donald Trump's approval back. But also in that moment, some Republicans were lost. And I think that is who is left for Vice President Harris to still pick up. A lot of these people are Republicans. They don't feel like they have a home. So of course it's going to take the vice president a lot of energy to get them on her side. But these folks are not committed to Trump. A lot of people voted for Nikki Haley in the primary, even after she wasn't a candidate anymore. And despite her, I don't know what else to call it, but being a coward, going and running back up under Donald Trump, I don't think her voters are following her there. And so some of them are still gettable for the vice president. Sure, the vice president's first campaign did not go well, but she now has been vice president for almost 4 years. People have been able to see a bit of her leadership, and now that she's become the top of the ticket, a lot more people have at least been able to learn a bit more about her. I don't think was it a short window? Sure. But there was an opportunity for some of these governors and other candidates to jump in. They chose not to, which I don't blame them for, because then they'd be in the same situation she is, which is having to run a campaign in a few months and try to win. Unlike her, these governors had a lot less name recognition. And from a selfish perspective, I'm sure they thought this is a risky move to make if I ever really want to be president, because anyone who runs right now probably will not get a chance to run again. I think I want the vice president to win, but from a purely political standpoint, if she doesn't win, this is probably the end of the road for her political career. But nonetheless, people had an opportunity. And I think by and large, you just saw the people who are most enthusiastic, who pay the most attention, who are most involved with the party come around Harris and be really excited about her.
But isn't the person to blame for this the president? I mean, it's Biden, isn't it? Joe Biden, and the fact that he
Yes,
left it so late that actually it would have been
absolutely.
impossible to, to have a contest without tearing the Democrat Party, apart in August for an election in November. Yeah, you can see the logic of the likes, of any senators standing forward. No way, not to go anywhere near it. Because of course any other candidates to not to go anywhere near it, because it would mean almost certain annihilation for the Democrats in this election. That actually it was, if Joe Biden had been a bit more honest and said, hang on a moment, I can't do this, my health isn't going to allow me to do this, and stepped aside much earlier in the year or at the back end of last year, that actually the Democrats could have had a much more open contest and actually picked a candidate who might fare better in the town halls, in the 60-minute debates, who has a better who could come across better and has a broader appeal, particularly in those swing states.
I don't disagree with you. That is why no one other than the vice president raised their hand to run for president. It was a really short window. It was not enough time to give people a real shot. Vice President Harris, if there was a primary, she probably would have won it anyway. I do, look, I'm not in Joe Biden's head. I think regardless of how much I like some of our past presidents, it takes a certain kind of person to run for president. And it's not someone who can be told that they can't do a job that they really feel in their heart and in their bones that they can do. And Joe Biden has run for president several times. So, again, I do think that he believed that he would be able to, do another term. But just when you are getting older, I mean, I'm not like as old as him, obviously, but I have a grandmother who, and I'm not trying to diagnose Joe Biden with anything, but what I can say of watching my grandmother who has dementia, it progresses rapidly. Like at first, it feels like it's not a big deal, and then all of a sudden, things are moving fast, and things are just not the same. It is hard to be president and also run for president. So I agree with you. Had he stepped down sooner, there might have been space for a better, primary process. But the other thing that we cannot forget is that it wouldn't have looked good for a bunch of Democrats, no others that are, women of color, to say, hey, vice president, it's not your turn. I'm going to cut in front of you. So that's a whole other dynamic that I think would have tore the Democratic Party apart. And I don't even know what we like to fight with each other, obviously. So I don't even know what that would look like if that happened that way.
Jennifer, without this becoming, sort of Democrat, sort of a podcast about what goes on in Joe Biden's head, was there a particular candidate you thought that the Republicans feared, that when you saw, the coronation back in the summer, you thought, thank you, we've got Harris, we don't have to worry about one particular candidate coming forward and actually taking on Trump, who would have a particular appeal in the Rust Belt or in the Sun Belt swing states?
Sure, and actually, I think there were polls done at the time that a generic Democrat could have beaten Trump. So I think there was a slight misstep there. I think Josh Shapiro, governor of Pennsylvania, very interesting, very popular. I think he's got like approval ratings above 60%. That is probably the swing.
You were worried about him?
Yeah, absolutely. Like he would have been great. And that's, Pennsylvania is the state everybody needs to win. That's number one. Gretchen Whitmer, Michigan, the governor there. Again, these are not people that I necessarily agree with their politics, but I can see how they are popular and well liked and are serious politicians who are liked in their own states. Mark Kelly of Arizona, astronaut, I think there are quite a few. Again, some good people. I will refrain from saying the governor of my home state of California, Newsom, because while I think he's been training for it his whole life, I think the state of California, sadly, these days would not have boded well for him. With regards to the Joe Biden situation, of course, I agree with Shaniqua. There's no way somebody, especially Joe Biden, who's run for president so many times before, he's not going to just walk away. Nor do I believe his wife, his brother, his son Hunter would have allowed him to do that. They had a very good gig going. But, and Theo, at the risk of sounding like somebody that, sort of brings the media into it, the media was really, really negligent in their coverage of Joe Biden definitely over the last year. And I would even go so far as to saying, over the last 3.5 years. It was very clear to anyone, as Shaniqua says, we all have grandparents, older people we know, those signs were clear. And they ran cover for him. And it was as recently as, I think, a month or two, whenever the G8 or G20 was, where people who were pointing out that his cognitive problems and showing actual video, they were being told, oh, that's a deep fake. This was all alternative media going on, Twitter or online kind of media sources, but they were being told, oh, these are deep fakes. Well, it wasn't until that fateful night of the debate where the media finally realized we can no longer run cover for this guy. There's one George Clooney op-ed, and, they all bail. So it was not just the Democrats or Joe Biden himself. I think it takes a village, as Hillary Clinton likes to say. And that's a shame, because as an American, I know there's 50% chance that the Democrat nominee has the possibility of winning. So I want the best candidate too. And then one other thing, the Democrats changed a bunch of rules earlier on. So people like Bobby Kennedy Jr., who wanted to run, as a Democrat, because he's, they're practically Democratic royalty in the United States, the Kennedy family, and they wouldn't let him. Same thing with Dean Phillips. He was a decent candidate. So I don't think there was an open space for all of these other people to get involved.
Just to pick up on the other candidates who didn't get involved, and of course there were some concerns, and the phrase that's used, that we see being used, is a word salad, that Harris can sometimes find herself in interviews or when she's on stage doing a Q&A or whatever it might be, suddenly starting a conversation or starting a thought process, and she doesn't quite know where she's going with it and where that thought process is going to finish. And she was criticised, I saw on CNN, by David Axelrod, Shaniqua, where she for going about a word salad city, as he put it, that actually she needs to be much more direct in the way she answers questions, that she addresses voters' concerns. Is that an assessment that you would agree with from Mr. Axelrod?
I don't. I think that Vice President Harris speaks to people, like she's having a conversation with them. And sometimes if someone's asking a question, you bring in a few facts or a few points to make the overall point that you're trying to make. It's hard for me to even think she is, offering word salad when, Donald Trump's on stage supposed to be giving his final closing message to get voters to support him, and he's talking about another man's genitalia. It's just, I feel like she's being held to this really unfair, unrealistic expectation.
Do you think it's misogynistic?
I think that Democrats are really afraid of Donald Trump getting reelected. And so anything that they feel is not perfect, they're going to criticize and point to, if Donald Trump wins, as the reason we didn't win. If Donald Trump wins, part of it is because half of this country likes him. They want him to be president. It's also because we have the Electoral College, which gives a lot more weight to the voters who support him, quite frankly. But, I don't want to characterize it as misogyny. Maybe it is. But I do think she's being held to a different standard. Yeah, I'll concede, at least partly because she's a woman. But I think Democrats are really afraid that Donald Trump's going to be reelected. And the media is not really covering, Donald Trump. And I don't even want to call them gaffes, his behavior, as a real threat that it is. We saw a lot of laughing and making fun of the Arnold Palmer jokes. We saw a lot of laughing and making fun of him being on stage for 20 minutes swaying and listening to music. That actually concerns me, because something is obviously wrong. And if he's supposed, I don't agree with him.
When you say wrong, just spell that out, sorry.
Yeah, I think there's a few things. I think that he is, he's not as inhibited as he used to be. He's just kind of letting who he is fly out. And to think of him doing that if he's, with a world leader and just saying ridiculous things, or, I mean, he should say how he really feels, but you have to be able to kind of hold your cards close to your chest when you are president, and especially when you're a world leader and you're dealing with our adversaries. I don't think he's going to be able to do that. I think that also, I don't want to put too much emphasis on this because, again, I don't want to be diagnosing anyone, but his cognitive ability is going down. I mean, if you listen to one of his long speeches, he's rambling. He keeps calling it the weave. I don't, if that's what he wants to call it, that's fine. But he's rambling and not making sense about things. People ask him about his economic policy, or what was the question he got about childcare costs, and he starts talking about tariffs. He got a question the other day about Google and an acquisition they wanted to make, and he starts talking about how negative search results come up for him on Google. It's just, and no, well, first he talked about Virginia and how they were trying to clean the voter rolls, and it's just, it doesn't make any sense. And so as he surrounds himself with more people who are not going to check him, who are not going to say, hey, we're going to do the right thing, not the thing you're asking us to do, all of that is just a combination for us to be unsafe, at risk, and, quite frankly, I'm just afraid of it. I mean, think back to 2020.
You said losing his inhibitions. Sorry to interrupt. You said he was losing his inhibitions. And another commentator separately put it to me on this podcast that they thought that he was losing his inhibitions because of his cognitive decline. Is that what you're saying, or you're saying something different?
I think it's both. I do think there's cognitive decline, but I think that as he has gone from, it's true what he said. He could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and nothing would happen. But now he's seen himself get away with so much stuff. And after January 6th, not being, convicted during impeachment, like, he feels untouchable. And so I think that is the other part of it. If you've never suffered a consequence January 6th should be considered treason. He literally sent a mob of people to undermine the election that we just had, where American voters decided that they didn't want him to be president anymore. And he was fine with his vice president being killed that day. He was fine with members of Congress being killed that day. He knew they had guns, and he still sent them up there. And so, if you don't get in trouble for that, why would you get in trouble for anything? So I do think it's part of his cognitive ability declining, but I also think it's because he just feels untouchable.
January the 6th, an act of treason, Jennifer Ewing, right or wrong?
No, it was not an act of treason. It certainly wasn't America's finest day by any means. But look, January 6th has been out there. It's been in the papers. There have been, trials. He was never... he was not actually charged, let alone convicted of insurrection. That was some other people. But look, I'm not going to defend that day. However, as much as people don't like that day, what they like less is, the inflation, the economy, the open southern border. So I think people are making a choice, and they're saying, yeah, is this guy a flawed man? Absolutely. He is, and by the way, he's almost 80 years old. So he's now the oldest candidate in the race. But I think you play the hand you're dealt. And before Biden got out of the race, this was the grudge sort of rematch, Biden versus Trump, that 75% of Americans did not want to see. I'm pretty sure those numbers have not improved too much since then. I don't think either side is overly thrilled with their candidates, but we are where we are. And I think people, especially this time around, Trump is surrounding himself with a wide variety of people, just as the Democrats have picked up our neocons, the Cheney family and Adam Kinzinger and some other people who want these forever wars. We're picking up people like Tulsi Gabbard and Bobby Kennedy Jr., which, as somebody that would not like these forever wars, I'm thrilled to have them. And then we can, of course, start discussing things like the food industrial complex connected to the big pharma, which Kennedy wants to discuss. So these are all really positive things that are going to be very different than the first Trump administration, where he'll even admit he got so many of these people on board that he ended up not getting along with because he never expected to win. And with regards to, these Arnold Palmer comments or the swaying back and forth, as I'm sure you'll know by now.
You see Ave Maria and saying Ave Maria and Sinead O'Connor at
you know what that,
the town hall in Pennsylvania.
Yes, but you know what happened then? There were two medical emergencies that happened. And so President Trump did the gracious thing, which was to stop his speech and wait until those people had been attended to. And he said, oh, what music shall we play? So they played that. So again, it's another situation of this sort of manipulation of a story, and it's factually incorrect. And with regards to, the media not pointing out negative things about Trump, I mean, I think we could all Google right now, negative Trump hits versus negative, whether it's Biden or Harris in this situation. I mean, CBS had something the other day, and it was, I won't remember the exact number, but it's plus 80 positive for Harris stories and plus 80 negative for Trump stories. So, sure, there's some Fox News and, there's some more independent or right-leaning podcasts and websites out there. But for the most part, I don't think anybody's going to say the media is in the tank for Trump. And then with, some of the comments that come out, the guy does non-stop speeches and media. He will talk to anybody. It doesn't have to necessarily be all scripted and safe and on side like Vice President Harris does. And as a matter of fact, it's been over 90 days since she was coronated and she's not done one press conference. So that's a bit strange. I mean, do the plebs, the people, not deserve to hear what she has to say? I mean, some of the most recent, the town halls or these things, she was not addressing policy. She really wasn't. And David Axelrod is absolutely right. These are word salads. These aren't things that happen. I mean, we're not live television right now, but, we've all done live television and you say the wrong thing or you say someone's name wrong or a number wrong. These things do happen. But, for a numbers game, Trump is still going great guns for the age he is and how much he does.
Shaniqua, can I just finally ask you your prediction, and I'll come back to you in a moment, Jennifer, your prediction for what happens on November the 5th?
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, I wasn't saying the press was not covering Donald Trump, and I meant they were not covering him as a threat that he is, not that they were not covering him.
You think that's right? Just on that point, do you think that you said the press was sort of laughing along about the Arnold Palmer jokes? They weren't taking him seriously. Is that what you're saying? They weren't taking him seriously as a threat. They weren't looking at the offhand comments. And they were sort of ha ha ha. Isn't it funny? Rather than, in 2 weeks' time, this man could be president. And what does that say about our country?
Yes, and the town hall he was having with Kristi Noem, there were two medical emergencies. After those were cleared, he could have continued the town hall, and he didn't want to. So it wasn't that the media spun that up into something that it wasn't. He could have continued and didn't. As far as election day, I mean, I don't think we're going to know who won on election day. So I think people will have cast their votes. We might find out maybe the Senate will know how that shakes out, but even the House we could know, but, places like California and Arizona, specifically California, where there's a handful of seats that could determine who controls the House. There's a lot of mail-in voting that takes some time. But if your question is who's going to win, I don't know.
Yeah.
This is a really, really close race. And, all of the polling that we've seen that is publicly available shows that this is a tight race. David Plouffe has been going around doing interviews saying their internal polls say the same thing. I think it's, I'm a little concerned that some Republicans are going around saying, Trump specifically, he has all these votes, it's going to be a landslide. It really makes me feel like he's planting the seeds for if he loses, that we're going to see something again like January 6th. Quite frankly, I am wondering if I'm going to stay in Washington, D.C. if he loses. And, there's a threat of something, stay in Washington, D.C. for that day if he loses. And I feel like there's a threat that we could see this again.
You'd want to leave. You'd leave.
Yeah, for those. Yeah, it actually makes me nervous to think about Vice President Harris winning, and I would love to go to her inauguration, but, I do get concerned about the security. I used to work at the Capitol. If I didn't have my staff ID, I would get sent around to the visitor's door. Even staff Capitol Police were really strict. So it was really difficult to sit home and watch these people. And I'm just talking about going into the office buildings, to watch these people actually bust into the Capitol. It's really hard to describe. I mean, just seeing that and knowing that the lack of respect that those people have for this country, the lack of respect that Trump has for this country. And so, yeah, I am nervous about him him losing and that happen. If he wins, that's also a bad outcome. So I don't know what will happen. I think it will be really close. I do think that Kamala Harris has some advantages. She has an actual field program going on, and I'm not sure what happened on the right with giving that over to Charlie Kirk and Elon Musk, two people who don't know anything about running a field program. I think that I obviously just think that Trump is a bad candidate, and I hope that more people are paying attention now than have been up until now. And I also, some people don't agree on this. I don't think the Dobbs decision, the impact of that has gone away yet. I think there are a lot of people in the Republican Party and in the Democratic Party who are still driven by that. In 2022, we saw a lot of the response to that. I mean, it happened, it leaked in May, official decision in June, and places like Kansas and Kentucky voted to maintain access to abortion. So I can't give you a straight answer on what's going to happen, but those are all the things that are in my head.
Jennifer, what's your prediction?
Sure. So I agree with Shaniqua. It's, it will be very, very, or it is close right now, shall we say. I think if we have a free and fair election, I do think Trump will win. And with regards to...
Sorry, just to pick you up on that, that sounds to me like if Harris wins, that you're in the camp of contesting it, right? That you already
Absolutely not. That's not at all what I said. Not at all what I said.
No, but that's the suggestion. I didn't say you said it, but it sounded like that was the suggestion. You're telling me it's not the suggestion.
Not at all what I meant to suggest. Not at all what I meant to suggest. I think President Trump will win, but I think it'll be close. Charlie Kirk and Elon Musk, while they've never run presidential campaigns, their ground game is very, very good, and we know that because Republicans have started to do mail-in and early voting this time around. President Trump made a huge mistake. The Republicans actually made a huge mistake in 2020, telling people not to vote early, saying you want to go to the polls on election day and do it then. And that turned out to be a mistake, I think, because anything can come up. So this time around, even Trump said go out and vote early. So I think that's good for Republicans. But again, anything could happen. It's 2 weeks. I do hope that we, as close as it looks right now, I hope we have a decisive answer on or the next day for either side. I mean, obviously I hope for the Republican side, but either way, I hope it's not close, because we do not want this dragging out days and, God knows what will happen. So let's hope that we know the final answer and the new president on or around November 5th.
That's all from me. I'm Theo Usherwood. My thanks to Jennifer Ewing and Shaniqua McClendon. For more on everything to do with the US election, please subscribe.